Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast, and a huge weekend of fights just happened at UFC 274 this weekend. We had some huge highlights and some real stinkers coming off this one. My name's Tim Wheaton, and I am joined by Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how you doing today, sir?
Yeah, like you said, really busy weekend, especially at UFC 274. We had Canelo and Bivol, we had PFL earlier on in the week, Bellator earlier on in the week. This weekend we've got Bellator again, UFC Fight Night again. We've got Floyd Mayweather's crazy, weird card where he's fighting somebody. Anderson Silva's on that. We've got, Castano Charlo too. So do forgive us if we don't manage to get around to everything, but we want to hit the main points. Just let's be honest, UFC 274's got plenty of talking points, so don't be surprised to get best part of an hour on just UFC 274.
The lightweight division, like UFC 274, the main event has so many talking points that I'm not sure if we're going to get very far outside of the lightweight division in reality here. Like, we're talking Friday, 0.5 over. An hour later, Charles Oliveira weighs in again at 0.5 over. There's a scales controversy. There's a conspiracy going on, even though no one else had weight. What do you make of the weigh-ins of Charles Oliveira? We're not even to the event yet. What do you make of the weigh-ins?
Yeah, it's we know that he's got a history of missing weight, but that was down at 145, and lately he's been hitting 155 bang on for his past few fights, so it hasn't been an issue. But yeah, it seems that everyone that was making slight complaints or slight comments about the weight, about the scale, it was Brazilian. You had obviously Charles Oliveira's got his controversy over the weight. You've got Norma Dumont, who again Brazilian, she missed weight by, I think that was only again 0.5 or 1.5. It's obviously non-title fight. She gets the pound either way. And is it Carnesoli? Ariane Carnesoli was she made weight, but she was complaining that the scales were slightly off. With that being said, Justin Gaethje, Rose Namajunas, Carla, Esparza, Tony Ferguson, everybody else made weight, and Gaethje, Esparza, and Namajunas all obviously had to hit that championship weight, and they all managed it. So friends of mine, we were having a little bit of a chat over WhatsApp, and I said, look, yes, he's missed weight, but does it really make a difference? If he wins it, he's going to go into another title fight, and if he loses it, he loses it anyway. If he loses the fight, Gaethje, whether he makes weight or not, Gaethje was always going to be the lightweight champion. If he wins the fight, yes, he loses out on championship sort of. He doesn't exactly enter the fight as the A side. But let's be honest, we know that he's the A side in the fight now. Whoever he's going to face next, we know is the A side after the performance that he put on.
Well, I think we were both really confident in picking Charles. After the weigh-in stuff, I thought he is drained. He got his title stripped from him officially, so I thought maybe he's a little bit disheartened coming to this fight. Maybe physically he's not there. Nope. One of the greatest title fights in UFC history happened on Saturday night. I guess not officially a title fight because he didn't walk away with the title. It doesn't matter so much of officially on paper he's not the champion, but he's the number one lightweight in the world. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we'll go on to talk about his performance and what it means after the fact, but we know he can make 155. This isn't a Calvin Gastelum down at 170 who barely ever made the weight. It's not a Johnny Hendricks who missed weight 3 or 4 times in a row. This was by 0.5 pounds. And, I still don't know why they use that historic scale of having to adjust it for every, because you're putting a lot of trust in the commission, which, the commission don't gain anything out of potentially, having a fighter miss weight or anything. However, use electronic scales. It's 2022. Use electronic scales, or use, scales. I don't even know what you'd call them. Just scales where you stand on it and the reader goes.
Yeah.
It just measures how much you weigh. And I was listening to something.
Yeah.
I think it was. I can't remember what it was I was listening to. I've listened to so much after the fact and before the fact, but they were saying, well, the Europeans are used to use the kilograms, and obviously, they have to weigh in pounds. That doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, that you have to weigh 155 pounds. Just make sure you make that weight. And obviously Charles Oliveira didn't. He lost it on the scale. But I don't think, I think after the performance that he put on, that's ever so slightly been forgotten. You know, he did make a very valid point of, you know, the UFC lightweight champion has a name, and that name is Charles Oliveira, and you know, I'm still seeing him as a champion. Whoever he goes on to face next, he is the A side. He is the favorite. He is the champion going into it. Is his let's be honest, it's his title to lose going into the next fight, despite the fact that he officially won't go in as champion.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. He is the champion. I mean, not officially. And this is why there's so many UFC titles where the lineage is absolutely ridiculous. Like I wanted to write something about the UFC title lineages and just show like it's ridiculous. John Jones has like 5 of them because BJ Penn. Remember BJ Penn left and fought Lyoto Machida, so all of those titles somehow led to John Jones. So there's some weird stuff, and this is one of those things of like, man, the title lineage just is ridiculous. However, I see him as he is clearly the number 1 lightweight in the world. I don't think it has anything to do with kilograms because all international fights, like whether you're looking at KSW or one, they just put like 71.8 kilograms. Everyone knows to make like exactly what it is to the point, sure. Whatever kilograms. Like that's not an issue. I also was at the weigh-ins for Bellator when it was in London with MVP, and a reporter asked the commission there in London, why do you guys still use like those kinds of scales? And the commission said, we don't. We use digital scales here. So that's not the reason. You know what I mean? That's exactly. Not it. It's just tradition. I swear the US is just like, man, we've done it this way for 70 years. We did it this way for Muhammad Ali. We're not going to change it. I swear that's the reason.
You can almost, you know, like you say, you can almost understand the tradition and the historic as a guy just tapping away, yeah. and even the, you know, the it's a historic sound. You can hear the clunk of the metal when the guys and girls stand on it. But yeah. Come on, you know, you've got people being awarded post-fight bonuses who are getting paid in Bitcoin. This is the kind of era that we're in now, and you know, this is the era that we're in. We don't need to use the historic scale. We don't need to have, you know, all these. The game's evolving so much, so that we can put on better fights, and you know, we're bringing fighting into 2022, and yet we're still using a scale that was used in the 60s and the 70s. It makes you question why, because, you know, let's be honest, if they're so confident of make them weigh in twice, make them weigh in on the historic scale for the ceremonial weigh-ins, but the official weigh-ins let them go on an electronic scale, and you know that eliminates any controversy because you can have all the fighters, you know, let's say the weigh-ins are 9 till 11, you can have all the fighters weighing in at between 9 and 11 on this exact same scale. You don't have to change it, you don't have to alter it, you don't have to mess around with it at all. That's an electronic scale, and it just measures the weight.
Fine.
Why are we not? Why is it? I really do not understand why that's not the case now. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. But you know, let's not take anything away from Charles Oliveira's performance. We've obviously both picked him last week, and you know, call us Mystic Max because we predict these things.
No, I think we both predicted kind of a later in the fight submissions, like kind of in the championship round later in the fight. This was a banger of a fight. This is one of those fights that I'll put on just to watch over and over again. I think Charles Oliveira had 2 moments where he almost finished Justin Gaethje via knockout. Justin Gaethje came back and definitely dropped Charles Oliveira hard a couple of times. Charles Oliveira pulled guard, tried one submission, switched and got a different submission. We're only 3 minutes into this fight and he got it wrapped up and all that action has happened. What a fun fight. What was your thoughts on the fight? I know that you wrote about some breakdowns before it. How did everything fit into it? It felt like Justin Gaethje just saw red and went for it.
Yeah, you see, I don't mean to sound too big-headed, but everything that Gaethje was his keys to victory, he was pretty much, you know, I wrote the keys to victory article is what you're alluding to, and you know, he started off well. Charles Oliveira rocked Justin Gaethje in the first 10 seconds, it seemed, but Gaethje was able to, you know, one of my keys to victory for Gaethje was to slam the leg kick.
Yeah,
that was working. Charles Oliveira was getting his leg slammed by Justin Gaethje. You know, another key to victory for Gaethje was to avoid the clinch. And that was clearly what Charles Oliveira was going for. You know, he landed 2 vicious knees. He even looked to wrap up the guillotine or some sort of, you know, necktie of Justin Gaethje early on, because Gaethje does have a tendency when he's in the clinch or when he's thrown, he sort of almost bends forward and looks down and to swing. Now, you bend forward against Charles Oliveira, he's going to snatch your neck, and you know, that's pretty much what we saw in the first. I think that was maybe within the first 20-25 seconds, is Charles was constantly pulling on the back of Gaethje's head to bring his head down. He was landing pretty savage knees to the body as well. And you know, Gaethje, it's not that he was tired by any fact, because you know we were 3 minutes into the fight, but you know, how many knees to the body can you take? How many uppercuts to the face can you take? Because Charles was pulling down on Gaethje's neck all the time, it was forcing Gaethje to, you know, pull back, and then that was leaving him slightly more exposed. And you know, I think, yes, like you say, Charles got dropped twice, but his willingness to go to the floor, it go to his back, makes me question how hurt he actually was, especially that second one where he did get dropped. He managed to throw the sort of teep kick, the push kick, and then sort of just, it looked like someone had just sort of smashed the back of his leg in, and he sort of concertinaed onto the floor. You know, he was willing to go to his back and appear maybe more hurt than he was, in order to work his BJJ. And you know, for me, only Charles Oliveira will know how hurt he was in those situations, but he did seem fairly willing to drop to his back before.
And that's why Justin Gaethje didn't follow him. He knew. He was thinking the same thing that you are.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, even like you say, Charles pulled guard at one point, and he wasn't able. You know, he pretty much let Gaethje up. Gaethje was able to use no real technique. He was just pushed on the bicep and got himself back up to then create that distance. But Gaethje's got in my opinion, two huge holes in his game. He was over swinging. He got excited by hurting Charles Oliveira, and he was over swinging. There was that one shot just before the finish where he overswung so hard that he lost his own balance. I mean, this is supposedly the top level of MMA, and you've got a guy, you know, no disrespect to Justin Gaethje, do not get me wrong, he would put me to sleep. With that being said, you know, over swinging at this level, you know, with someone, I don't like to bring him into the conversation, but with someone like Conor, if you ever swing like that, he's going to punish you. He's going to be just out of that range. You see, with Charles Oliveira, he got all the way out of that range. He's not that great a counter striker as far as eluding. You know, he catches a lot on his arms and you know, on his elbows. But if someone like Conor McGregor faces Justin Gaethje next, and Gaethje swings like that and misses that wildly, McGregor's going to get just out of range to then come back into range and punish him. And that is kind of what we saw with the finish. You know, one of the things I wrote about in my article is Justin Gaethje can't throw two long extended combinations, because Charles will look to counter I thought he looked to counter by taking him down. He actually just looks to counter by just throwing a straight right down the pipe, and you know, instantly working his BJJ. You know, he got the hook on the leg, he got the under the arm, he got the hook under the arm, and then he was just, you know, he's chaining his submissions. He's going from what we looked like we were almost going to get a triangle from the backside, and then Gaethje, you know, showing that second huge hole in his game by just looking to use Derek Lewis jiu-jitsu and just get up, and unfortunately someone like Charles Oliveira, you're going to get your neck snatched. And I thought it was kind of poetic in a way that Gaethje was talking about all week. You know, Charles is a quitter, and Gaethje was ultimately the one that tapped.
Man, I bet he didn't go out. He did tap. Maybe that's fine. That choke looked really tight. I don't think there was any space on him, you know, pulling an arm down and trying to get out or anything like that. I think that was as tight as it gets. But yeah, that was a super fun fight. I love your breakdown. Your technical breakdowns are absolutely sound. That was absolutely awesome. I don't think I have anything to add on that. Like that was a great breakdown. But yeah, some of those were my notes, and so that's perfect. The
Great
lightweight.
minds think alike, you see.
Well, yeah. Well, I was thinking of like a few of those of like pulling guard, but he probably wasn't hurt. And there's a few other things, but man, you got way more than I did, which is great. That's why you're the best in the business.
I mean, that's the thank you. That's the advantage of a 3-minute fight. You know, I've watched a fight 3 or 4 times, and you know, I'm still picking stuff up on the 4th time of watching it. You know, if you think I'm going to go back and watch the co-main event again, you're sadly mistaken. My notes on that are pretty sparse, but we'll go into that in a second. Something else I have written, you know, I don't know what will be next for Gaethje, but if it's Makhachev or Dariush, he's struggling again. You know, these guys have got elite ground games. You know, Makhachev's got the elite sambo background. Dariush has got a solid BJJ base, and Justin Gaethje doesn't, unfortunately, unless he can get it. You know, and unless he can get it done on the feet, he's struggling. And you know, we've seen with Gaethje since he picked up those 2 losses, he's been given, I wouldn't say favourable matchups by any stretch, but they're matchups that sort of suit his style. You know, James Vick, stand-up fighter. Edson Barboza, stand-up fighter. Donald Cerrone has got a ground game, but predominantly a Muay Thai fighter.
True.
Tony Ferguson, great jiu-jitsu, stand-up fighter, really. And yes. Michael Chandler, great wrestler, but we know he loves to stand and bang. There his last 5 wins. There's not a wrestler in there. When he faced the wrestler Khabib, look what happened. When he faced or a jiu-jitsu specialist in Charles Oliveira, look what happened. If he faces someone like Islam Makhachev next, for me, that would be maybe not the next fight to make, but that would be a fight that I want to see, because how does he handle, you know, Islam Makhachev isn't the elite wrestler that Khabib is, but he's certainly a better wrestler than we'd assume Tony Ferguson has shown thus far in his career.
Well, let's talk about, so the top of the lightweight division is right now full of chaotic energy. There's a lot of chaos at the top. We don't entirely know what's going on. There's not really a champion, and there's not a clear number 1 contender. Islam Makhachev and Michael Chandler and arguably Beneil Dariush are all right there. What do you do with these 3? Like, Islam is kind of the only guy, despite not having a really good top 5 victory. He's the only guy who hasn't had a loss in the last little while here. I mean, Beneil Dariush is there. He is injured, and he's not that good of a fighter. But Michael Chandler's right up there, too. What do you do with this division? If you're the matchmaker, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I was looking, when I was writing my notes last night, I was looking down the division and thought, what could be next for Justin Gaethje? Well, we've seen him face Dustin Poirier, and I don't think that'll be the fight to make, because Poirier and Gaethje obviously both coming off title fight losses, to the champion Charles Oliveira. I don't see them two clashing again, because they're not. Yes, they're both huge names, but they've got probably more value in other fights. You know, a Nate Diaz fight for Dustin Poirier, for example. Yeah. You then go one down. Islam Makhachev looks to be more in a title shot. I don't think he'll want to sit out until Gaethje's ready, then go through a camp and then face Justin Gaethje. Beneil Dariush, like you said, he's injured at the moment. He had to pull out the Islam fight in, I think that was the beginning of April, maybe the beginning of March, that they were scheduled to fight. But listening to the press conference yesterday, Dana's still interested in that fight between the two, Islam Makhachev and Beneil Dariush.
Fine.
We've just seen the Michael Chandler fight, and I don't think that's the fight to make next either. You know, in as good as a fight it was, I'm not really quite sure what that does for either man. You know, yes, it was a phenomenal fight, but do you do that one next? Because you got Michael Chandler, who's, you know, he's hot at the moment, and I don't really personally think that, you know, he's here for a good time, not a long time. Michael Chandler, you know, he is at the twilight of his career. And I don't think we start doing rematches unless it's for a title. RDA, obviously, we know that he's booked to fight for Zeev. Tony Ferguson, I don't want to see anything to do with Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson again. And then you're talking, you know, Justin Gaethje's ranked joint for some reason, joint top spot. They're both ranked number 1 in the division with Dustin Poirier.
Oh yeah, Dustin's up there too. Dustin and Conor are yelling from the sidelines, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah. You know, you've got Gregor Gillespie, and then you've got Conor McGregor 8 and 9. Arman Sarukian and Mateusz Gamrot have obviously just booked to fight each other. Dan Hooker's not fighting Justin Gaethje. Brad Riddell's not fighting Justin Gaethje. Neither is Diego Ferreira. So I think Gaethje takes a long time out now, because he just needs as ridiculous as it sounds for someone that isn't the champion, he needs the division to sort itself out, like we saw with Henry Cejudo. You know, he took, 2 years away, a year and a half, 2 years away from the sport, has let both the flyweight and bantamweight divisions kind of sort themselves out. You know, we've got established champions in each, we've got several contenders, and now Cejudo's coming back in. And Justin Gaethje needs, you know, a Rafael dos Anjos to beat a Rafael Fiziev and then cement himself as, you know, the number 2 guy in the division, so that it's some new blood for Gaethje to face. And whether they do that Poirier fight again, I'm not so sure, because Dustin's, you know, he's been out for a while now since facing Charles, and he looks to be maybe going up to 170. He wants the Nate Diaz fight. You know, Dustin's in the, unfortunately for Dustin, I think he's in the money business now rather than the belt business. And, you know, rightfully so. But, you know, like I say, we haven't seen Dustin since the December last year. I can't see Justin Gaethje back anytime before December this year. Whether Dustin would want to, you know, he fought 3 times last year. Whether he'd want to have a whole year out after fighting 3 times in 2021 is, I don't think he will.
Yeah, same as you. I mean, I don't. It's not entirely clear what to do with the top spot. I agree. I don't know if Islam really has earned it. But let me ask you a question that we've never asked on the show before, because we avoid this kind of stuff. What do you do with a guy like Conor McGregor? He's calling out the lightweight champion. He's calling out the welterweight champion. He's way too big for 145 at this point, I guess. I don't know. But what do you do with a guy like him who's been injured for a year? Apparently, he's ready to get back in there. What do you do with him? He's the biggest star right now in the sport, and he's probably arguably the biggest star in the sport's history. What do you do with a guy like this?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that he's the biggest star in sports history. Whether he's the biggest star now, I'm not sure how much his stock even went down by losing those 2 to Dustin. I don't think, to be honest, they do. You know, is everyone still going to go crazy for a Conor McGregor fight week? Absolutely.
Yeah,
whether
absolutely.
you're Irish, American, Canadian, English, Russian, even, you know, the Russians are going to tune in to watch McGregor lose. And that's what Floyd Mayweather said. You know, you don't have to like me. You're either going to tune in to watch me knock someone out or get knocked out. But as long as you tune in, I don't care, you know. And with McGregor, what's next for McGregor? Who knows, you know. Is it going to be Kamaru Usman? Absolutely not. Let's be real here. You know, nobody wants to see that fight apart from Kamaru Usman's accountant. You know, let's be honest. You know, that's a payday for Kamaru Usman. That's all that is really. And for me, there's 3 potential fights for McGregor. You either make the Nate Diaz 3 fight at 165.
I can see that.
You make a Tony Ferguson fight. But I'm not sure if I want to see. I want to see first round against Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson face Conor McGregor.
Yes, and we will get to that as well. Tony looked all right.
Or Michael Chandler at 165 or 170.
Great, that'd be great.
I think it's a bad fight for Conor, but we've seen in his past 3 or 4 fights, Michael Chandler, that he's there to be landed on. He's there to be dropped.
Yep.
But he's also there to be exciting. And, you know, like you say, we'll go on to
let's do it.
Michael Chandler.
Let's do it. Let's jump in. We'll skip a fight and come back to it later. But yeah, Michael Chandler hit with a bunch of left hooks.
You don't even have to come back to it if you don't want that. I suppose we have to say a little bit on it. But, you know, while we're on the lightweight division, it makes sense to skip back and then skip forward. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that for now. But yeah, Michael Chandler ate a ton of left hooks from Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson was landing well. He looked amped up. He looked happy to be there. He looked like he was landing well. And then Michael Chandler, he is growing into one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. The UFC is putting the hard push on him, and deservedly so. He is one of the biggest stars in the sport, despite only winning like 1 in the UFC. Now he's won 2 in the UFC, and this one by pretty brutal highlight reel knockout. This was hard to watch because I thought, oh man, Tony's really putting it together here. This is kind of coming together for the guy. No. What do you make of the matchup? What do you do with these guys? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. You know, with 1 fight in the UFC, 1 win in the UFC, entering this fight.
Yeah.
And yet we still were scrambling to see Chandler fight again. You know, this is one ex-Bellator star that's come over to the UFC that's really worked. You know, Ben Askren obviously did fight in Bellator, come over from one. That didn't really work. Will Brooks came over from Bellator. Again, did not really work. Michael Chandler coming over from Bellator has worked. He is money. You know, he's headlined a pay-per-view. He's been, I think he was the co-main event against Dan Hooker. I think he was the third fight on the card when he fought Justin Gaethje. And that was, you know, he opened the card, opened the main card when he fought Justin Gaethje, because it was the Trevor Whitman trio at UFC 268.
Right.
And now he's the third fight again on this card. If he's not in a 5-round main event next time out, whoever he faces, whether it's McGregor, whether he's calling for Nate, he's calling out everybody, and that's what he needs to do. Because apart from McGregor, I feel that he is the A side going in. He puts on some of the best promos that we've seen in since the McGregor days, you know. And yes, they are rehearsed. But this is what needs to happen, you know. You don't need guys just to come and try and ad-lib when they're sort of in the midst of a fight. You want people to, like, you know, for me, Michael Chandler is the MVP of UFC 274. You know, after the rough, you know, you can't say anything on Tony Ferguson's form. He clearly won round one. He dropped Chandler. Yes, he got taken down, but he was piecing Chandler up from the bottom. He injured Chandler's eye, and you know, if you watch the post-fight press conference, Chandler's eye looks rough. You know, it's all swollen, bloody, bruised.
Yep.
He was a constant threat on the feet before he obviously got taken down, and you know, he didn't receive too much damage even when he was down there. Tony, you know, a couple of hard leg kicks from Chandler, but you know, that comes with fighting anybody in today's MMA. Is you're going to receive hard leg kicks, hard low kicks. He ended the round, you know, he patted Chandler on the back. He walked back to his corner with a huge smile on his face. And I was thinking, look, Tony Ferguson's won the first round. He's going to go out and win the second round. Then he's going to be given hell in the third round. And then the second round happened. And if you look on UFC stats, I didn't quite realise second round total strikes thrown by Michael Chandler, 1. One strike, and that was a strike that absolutely sent Tony Ferguson to the shadow realm. You know, I mean, I thought it looked like a high kick. When you watch it in real time, I didn't see the foot come up.
No, it was fast. He was lightning fast, wasn't it?
And for sure. And you know, I think it's not only that speed, but it's the unpredictability of. I've never seen Chandler even throw a high kick, let alone throw a front kick like that. No. And you know, front kick like that followed by 3 backflips and a great call out. Michael Chandler, yes, he got the post fight bonus. You know, Dana called it one of the most vicious knockouts he's ever seen, and to be honest, it didn't help Tony the way that he was knocked out. He went face down. He was stiff. They rolled him over. His eyes were open, but he was stiff, and it was worrying for a moment there, until we heard obviously on the broadcast that he was up, and he did. He was stood there with Chandler, and we've seen a post from Tony. I read it this morning saying, you know, kind of essentially, you know, these things happen.
It was one of his better fights that he lost in recently. I know he's on a 4-fight skid, but I feel like this one doesn't really speak about his current skills. Whereas the other 3, I feel like were very reflective. This one, he looked good. Am I wrong?
He was dominated especially his past 2. You know, he had his moments against Justin Gaethje when he landed, you know, the first round and a half. You know, he landed the uppercut and knocked Gaethje down, or could have finished Gaethje if it had another minute or 2. Against Chandler, he was 10-9. He was 1-0 up, in my opinion.
Yep.
And then he just gets front kicked to the face, which, you know, it is what it is. When you're down on your luck like Tony Ferguson is at the moment, what can you do? I just feel so bad for Tony. What's next for Tony? That Tony Ferguson in round 1, I want to see fight again, because he's not in any trouble, you know, and I do have a feeling that he will fight again if Dana and the UFC let him.
Yeah, I think he will too. Yeah.
but I want to see him against someone who hasn't got absolutely phenomenal knockout power. You know, he's ranked number 7 now. Unfortunately, I don't think I don't think he'll drop down in the rankings, because if you look below him, Gregor Gillespie barely ever fights. Conor McGregor doesn't fight.
Doesn't fight.
Rafael Fiziev is booked to fight RDA, but you can't jump him up 3 spots to leapfrog Tony Ferguson. And Tony lost to a guy that's ranked above him, so it doesn't really do much for his rankings. I'm really not sure where Tony goes from here. Brad Riddell, but he's got knockout power.
I wanted to say Diego Ferreira, just because he's a little bit more of a ground focused fighter, and he's not going to just absolutely pummel you brutally as we've seen with Ferguson. I think he does stay at lightweight. I think he stays in the UFC and he stays active. Maybe takes a year off, but yeah, Diego Ferreira or someone in that ilk, just so
That's
we can
exactly
give him.
who I was looking at. Because he hasn't got that one punch knockout power like Chandler and Gaethje, and yes, he's good on the ground, but he's not got that kind of mauling style like a Makhachev or a Khabib.
Yeah.
That fight would remind me quite a lot of the Robbie Lawler Brian Barberena fight, which is going to be a barn burner. We know that's booked for, I think it's International Fight Week, that one, but
that's going to be a banger or sad.
Exactly, but these are two guys that aren't going to be champion anytime. Obviously we've got a former champion, but they're two guys that they're not in title contention, but they'll come and they'll put it all on the line. And Tony Ferguson versus Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira at one point was looking like he could even make a run at the belt.
Yeah.
But one thing led to another, and he never quite made it to that. He never quite stepped over that sort of line into title contention. But I think that for me, that's the fight to make, because it's the fight of least resistance for Tony Ferguson in a way. And we're not in the business of just giving people easy fights, but when you've got someone like Tony Ferguson who's had his problems outside of the octagon, and now he's having his problems inside the octagon, you just want what's best for the guy, really. And like I say, you can't say anything about Tony Ferguson's fighting form, because in that first round, he was winning the first, I don't know officially what time he was winning the first 5 minutes and 16 seconds until that front kick landed.
He was. And he was looking good doing it too.
For sure. And, respect to Michael Chandler, he could have easily followed up with shots on Tony Ferguson, but he knew. He's experienced enough now, to realise that, these shots aren't, any extra shot would just have been unnecessary. And, respect to Michael Chandler for that, because that could have done Tony some pretty catastrophic damage if he was already confirmed to be absolutely out and then receives several shots. But yeah, respect to Michael Chandler, respect to Tony Ferguson. He made no excuses, and these things happen. I've never seen Michael Chandler throw even a high kick. And he said, I don't know if it was in his post-fight Octagon interview or in the post-fight press conference, but he said, yeah, it is something we looked at. Tony just hold his arms quite wide. It's just, phenomenal game planning by Chandler and Henry Hooft.
And I'm surprised that it worked, because he not only, I think he doesn't throw head kicks, because I always imagined that he was a little bit too short to do that at lightweight. Like, his hips are way lower than everybody else's in the division. And this one landed fine and it knocked him out. Clearly there's a lot of power. But that's a weird thing that he said with the way that Tony Ferguson stands. Conor said the same thing. He said that Tony's frame isn't good for counter-striking. He leaves himself way too open. And that's why, like, Justin Gaethje absolutely pummeled him and stuff like that. But Tony's never been an orthodox by-the-book striker. He's always been quite odd, and it's worked for him in the past. But in the past, he's also got away with being very tough and being able to walk through a lot of hard punches. And I don't think he's there anymore. He's lost that toughness. He's lost his chin at this point.
And yeah, for sure. And that brings me back to the main event. We've seen Justin Gaethje get hit with far heavier shots than what I think Charles Oliveira dropped him with, in my opinion. Charles didn't look like he hit him with too heavier. That straight was, don't get me wrong, it would have put 90% of lightweights on their backside. But Justin Gaethje, even in his last fight against Chandler, I think Chandler hit him with far more heavier shots. How much did that Chandler fight take out of Gaethje? Really? How much did it? There's only so many times that you can get landed flush on the chin and just carry on walking forward. And maybe we're seeing Gaethje's exciting style catch up with him, and the same with Ferguson. Maybe we're seeing Ferguson's exciting style catch up with him. That war with Lando Venata, who nobody really expected Lando to be able to land on Justin Gaethje because he was coming on on Tony Ferguson because he was coming in on short notice. Anthony Pettis had him rocking and rolling. Edson Barboza, Kevin Lee took him down, slammed him down, and landed some pretty savage ground and pound. And are we just seeing Tony Ferguson's exciting style and Justin Gaethje's exciting style catch up with them? I think possibly we are.
Yeah,
but
I think so too.
And going into the co-main event now, are we seeing?
Here we go. We're getting into it.
What are we seeing? Absolutely
2.6 strikes per minute. Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I was listening to Morning Combat, Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell earlier on in the week, and they were saying, look, no disrespect to Carla Esparza, don't see her way to victory. And we said it on this podcast last week. We're picking Rose because Rose has more ways to win. Yeah. I don't see that Carla Esparza wins this fight on the feet. And when it goes to the ground, she's solid getting it to the ground, but she hasn't, Rose has got really good BJJ. Now, I was ready to give it a complete public service announcement, apology to Carla Esparza if she would have won this fight. I am not giving a public service announcement to anybody. I'm apologizing to everyone that we said, make sure you tune in for this co-main event, because no word of a lie, it's the worst fight I've ever seen, especially at this high level. You get, and a lot of people, the first round I can forgive. I can forgive the first round because nerves, seeing, kind of eking each other out. We saw it, Woodley and Thompson too, after they had that barn burner in New York. They didn't do it. It was a 10-10 in the first round. The second, third, fourth, and half of the fifth round, I'm just confused. It's the worst fight I've ever seen. At least with Yoel Romero and Izzy and Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis, they've got that one hitter quit and knockout power.
Yes.
Especially with Ngannou Lewis, it was a 3-round. So there wasn't, yes, it was 15 minutes of them two looking at each other, but it was 3 rounds. It was a non-title fight.
True.
And I put something on my Instagram. Carla Esparza landed 30 total strikes over 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So that means if you break that down, there was only 5 minutes across the whole fight where she landed more than one strike. And then you compare that to Charles Oliveira outlanded Carla Esparza in the 3 minutes 22 seconds that he was competing.
What a load of crap.
I just cannot understand. We've seen Rose complaining. She was surprised that she didn't win. She was complaining at the post-fight press conference saying that she thought she won because she landed the more strikes and she took Carla down in the last round. As a defending champion who has a clear advantage on the feet, she needs to go and, yes, she needs to beat the champion to become the champion, but she needs to go out there and defend her belt, and she didn't. Yeah. Both of the ladies there were just defending fresh air. Rose landed 7 strikes in the first 10 minutes. And, it's a shame because we've seen her now come out on social media saying, I feel like a shitty person, and everyone's, backing her and saying, oh, you're not, you're a great fighter, you're the best to ever do it, blah, blah, blah. And, nobody wants to see Rose say, oh, I'm a shitty person, but that has nothing to do, everyone that loses a fight probably feels like shit. But when you go out there and put everything on the line, I can guarantee you, if Rose went out there, put everything on the line, had a fight of the year contender, or even fight of the night contender.
Yeah.
Norma Dumont versus Macy Chiasson wasn't the best fight on the card, and that was the second best women's fight on the card, in my opinion. You are a 115-pound strawweight champion of the world who's coming off multiple rematches. This is another rematch for you, And I can guarantee you Rose would not have felt so bad if she went out there, put it all on the line, and was just outclassed by Carla Esparza. But because she went out there and just didn't do anything,
nothing happened. Yeah,
you're going to feel like shit, because people are going to get on at you and say, look, at the end of the day, you're the champion. You've got a clear advantage on the feet. You've gone to war with Joanna Jędrzejczyk over 25 minutes. You've gone to war with Weili Zhang over 25 minutes. You've knocked both women out. Yep. You've got a win and a loss against Jessica Andrade. And then you go out there against Carla Esparza, who on the feet, unfortunately for Carla, no disrespect to the champ, is pretty goddamn awful on the feet. She's stiff. She's a lot smaller than Rose as well. So Rose has got a clear, not only has she got advantages in skill, she's got height and reach on Carla. And Rose just looked petrified to be taken down by Esparza.
Yeah.
And, the question I want to ask you is, if you're Trevor Whitman, you're listening to Pat Barry say, this is everything we expected. You're doing great. If you're Trevor Whitman, what are you thinking there?
I struggled with that too, because you brought up the Romero fight and the Lewis Ngannou fight. And what made those fights different than this one is that all four fighters in those fights knew that they were in a garbage fight. It seemed like Rose and Carla didn't know that they were in a really crappy fight until like the post-fight press conferences, when they were told. Someone whispered it to them, like, that was trash. But I don't know entirely, because Trevor Whitman's a consummate professional. And I know publicly he's always going to support Pat Barry and say, like, he's supportive. He says the right things to keep her amped up. But at a certain point, you have to say, like, Rose, you need to step on the gas here. You need to put something significant going on here, because you're just throwing feints. You're just throwing air. I don't know what you're seeing in this fight, but nothing's happening, right? Like, you got to say, Pat, shut the hell up. And Pat must have known. He was like a brawl. He was a fairly technical kickboxing fighter who was extremely aggressive. He must have known that nothing was happening in this fight.
I mean, exactly. And just going, Pat Barry had only 15 MMA fights, but
they were fun. They were all fun.
13 of those were in the UFC.
Yeah.
You've got victory. He stood across from Crow Cop, Joe Beltran, Chet Congo, Stefan Struve, Sean Jordan. He's got, in his third UFC fight, he got knockout of the night and fight of the night. He's got fight of the night, and he's got another knockout. So he's got 4 post-fight bonuses. He's seen Rose go to the well against Weili Zhang the second time round, and not so much Joanna the second time around, because that was more of a point fighting. But he's got to have seen. How can he not see? And I think it was at the end of the third round, or maybe the fourth round, he was like, look, the crowd are booing because she's not doing anything. The crowd are booing because none of you are doing anything. If you could say that, when Max Holloway fought Calvin Kattar, which is one of our favorite fights to always refer back to.
Yes,
Calvin Kattar wasn't doing anything. That's when you can say, the crowd's booing because he's not doing anything. Yeah, no, but Max Holloway was throwing 90 strikes a second. That's a difference. The crowd is not booing because one person isn't doing anything. The crowd is booing because you are both stood there watching each other. Carla wasn't even throwing feints. No. She was just. But the thing is, she was also biting quite heavy on the feints of Namajunas. So the first round I can forgive, like I say. The second round is where you really need to start implementing those traps that you set up in the first round.
Absolutely. You made a miss. Punish them. Why?
Exactly, for sure. And, every time that Carla took Rose down, Rose pretty much popped straight back up to her feet. There was no, across the entire fight, Carla had 22 seconds control time, 2 of 11 takedowns.
Yeah.
Why in the third, fourth, and fifth round, the second and third round, Carla shot for 4 takedowns and didn't land a single one. So going into the fourth round, Rose needs to take more risks because she knows that she can defend. She's defended the first 4 takedowns that Carla Esparza has thrown at her. Mm-hmm. Risk it a little bit, And there are shots against a wrestler that you can throw that don't leave you open to the counter. The teep kick, for example, is not the sort of the roundhouse kick where you're bringing it around into your opponent's body where they can latch onto that leg if they do catch it. or the low kick where they can snatch your leg. The teep kick comes straight up the middle, and it's a lot more difficult for a wrestler to both defend that and try and counter it at the same time by grabbing the leg, especially when these are 115-pound fighters.
Yeah.
They're the fastest, in theory, the fastest fighters on the roster. Throw a quick teep kick, throw a quick leg kick, throw a jab out there. The chances of Rose being countered, she could have thrown a jab and even dropped her rear hand. If she throws a jab with the left, drop your right hand, so you're there to dig the underhook if Carla goes for the shot. And I thought it was just I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, I wasn't a big fan of the fight.
No one was.
Exactly. One of the weirdest things about the fight was that Rose got a post-fight £30,000 Bitcoin bonus from the fans.
Already cancel this program. It's not working. This sucks.
Michael Chandler got one. I think Charles Oliveira got the other. But
fair.
Rose Namajunas got one for losing one of the worst fights I've ever seen. That is what it. That's a debate for another day. That's an article opportunity for somebody to write and just go off on. But it's nothing against her. I don't want to see Rose in a title shot anytime soon again, because it's a shockingly bad fight, but it opens up the division quite nicely, in my opinion. We've now got Carla Esparza as champion, who's never fought Weili Zhang. She fought Marina Rodriguez, but that was a close split decision, and Marina's looked phenomenal since then. Mm-hmm. She never fought Mackenzie Dern. Her game's to take the fight to the ground, whereas Mackenzie Dern's game is to dominate on the ground. Mm-hmm. She never fought Jessica Andrade. She's already got a loss on her record in a title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who returns at the next pay-per-view. She dominated Yang Xiaonan. She's never fought Nina Ansaroff. I don't think she fought Tisha Torres. Mm-hmm. New blood for once at 150. Because, Rose, she's got 2 fights against Weili Zhang, 2 fights against Carla Esparza, 2 fights against Jessica Andrade.
Correct.
2 fights against the returning Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Yep.
It was stale. That division was stale. Marina Rodriguez could have been the next contender. And yet that still wouldn't have interested me as much as ironically, Marina Rodriguez versus Carla Esparza fight interests me a lot more than a Rose Namajunas fight. And for Rose, does she fight Mackenzie Dern next? Probably not. Does she fight Marina Rodriguez next? Probably not. I think she probably has a main event against the loser of Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Or she steps away from the sport for a good year and a half. I can see that happening as well. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because, at the end of the day, that is a shocking performance. And yes, I don't want to, heap more sort of shit at her table that, she does feel like a shitty human being, like she said, but she either needs to bounce. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. She could fight tomorrow. She took no damage in that fight. She had a bit of a swollen eye, and she gave out no damage in that fight either. Mm-hmm. Joe Rogan even made a comment to Carla Esparza, who's getting married next week. Looking for you, your face is absolutely as you walked in. Those ladies could have fought like that for 2 hours and never got fatigued. There was not if you look at Justin Gaethje, after 3.5 minutes of fighting, he looked tired. He was sweating. His hair was all over the place because he was so hot and warm. These 2 ladies looked like they just walked into the octagon, and I almost had to double take to say, "Look, Joe Rogan, what are you doing interviewing them before they even fight?" Carla Esparza did not look like she'd been in a fight for 25 minutes.
No.
But the good, like I say, the best thing to come out of that fight is that it opens up the division.
Yeah.
The worst thing to come out of that fight is the fight itself.
I think Rose is probably going to sit out for a while because that's the way UFC tends to do things. They punish you by not giving you a fight. The title's quite clear. The winner of Zhang and Joanna. Winner of that is clearly next. And that's kind of fresh. It's been a few years since Joanna's fought Carla. If Zhang wins, that's also fresh for Carla. It's a very easy fight to make now. But let's move forward. What else did you see on the card that you liked? What else do you want to call out?
Yeah, I've got two sort of the best of the rest, as it were. Lupi Godinez, absolutely phenomenal performance. She came into the fight physically kind of slowly, looked the much better fighter as far as just her physique is phenomenal. She's big, she's stacked, she's muscular. And Luffy did not care. 8 takedowns. 13.5 minutes of control time. And that sounds, on the face of it, that sounds like a boring fight. 13.5 minutes of one lady just sort of lying on top of the other. She was searching for submissions for the entire fight. She was landing hard ground and pound. When they stood up, Lupi Godinez rocked her.
Mm-hmm.
2 30-26s and a 30-27. I do not do Godinez justice. She dominated that fight. She's on a 2-fight winning streak at the moment. She's just, I think she's. There's a real chance that we see Lupi Godinez now kick on from being that. She holds the record for shortest time in between 3 fights in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
I think she really kicks on now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it. I was looking down the Tapology rankings. I wouldn't be surprised to see her face a ranked girl next in the strawweight division, because you've got
absolutely.
She's as per Tapology, she's ranked 15. With that being said, the ladies above her, I think, is a big step up in competition. There's the only lady in and around her sort of ranking without a fight is Amanda Lemos, who fought a couple of weeks ago and was badly beaten. But make that fight, if she's at a difficult position, Lupi Godinez, where no one's going to want to fight her because she's not ranked unless she gets a ranking next to her name this morning. They haven't come out yet. But she's not ranked, and yet she's dangerous. There's not a lot of upside to facing her, but there's a hell of a lot of downside because she is so good. It is difficult. We've got girls ranked in the top 15 who've got one win in the UFC, which is what it is. But let's not take anything away from Godinez, who put on, without a doubt, the performance of her career.
Yeah.
And luckily for her, there's a lot of girls that have got fights booked in and around the next few weeks. You got Angela Hill and Jandiroba booked, I think, this week. This weekend. Amanda Hebas are obviously fighting up at 125 pounds, but she's fighting this weekend as well. Then you've got Nina Nunes and Cynthia Calvillo at the beginning of July. You've got Jessica Penne, who she's already fought. Obviously, she's fighting in the middle of July. You've got Poliana Viana, who's fighting, week after next. So you've got a lot of girls in and around Godinez's ranking who are fighting soon, and I think she needs to kick on and really, she's still young in the game. She's what, 28, and we haven't seen wrestling like that in the strawweight division since Tatiana Suarez, in my opinion, and it's an exciting prospect for sure.
No, I think it's, I agree with you. She's always kind of been one of those people that we've had our eye on. I think she took a fight too quickly and then ended up losing, but for the most part, she has looked like a very promising future contender. I think that's very clear to say. There's nothing else for me on this card. Do you want to move forward?
The Brandon Royval fight was fun, but that was just like two flies around the octagon, just searching for submissions. And I thought, the way that Royval wrapped up that, did it finish in a guillotine in the end? I know he had a guillotine and he had a sort
guillotine,
of Peruvian necktie at one point. I think it was some. I know it's some sort of choke, but they transitioned from one choke to the other.
Fun little time.
Elsewhere, Tracy Cortez, if she wasn't with, I hate to say it, but if she's going to be exposed at flyweight when she really gets to the better of the division. And they were playing too much for me. They were playing too much into the fact that her and Brian Ortega are in a relationship. Nobody cares.
I didn't watch the commentary. Why? Who cares?
Saying, her boyfriend Brian Ortega's in the corner, and on UFC Instagram it was, Brian Ortega's the best photographer, and then on the UFC Instagram later on it was a video of them hugging, and then the broadcast cut to her after her fight, sat on his lap and watching the fights. It's just like, Who
I was
cares?
gonna say, if you wouldn't do this to Brock Lesnar, and then I remember that he married Sable, the WWE, and I was like, oh yeah, they would definitely do that with Brock Lesnar. So,
Yeah,
equal
I
opportunities
mean,
all over.
I just don't.
I
No,
wish
it's
it
not
was
for
Brock and
me.
Sable. I'd be all over that. I'd be like, yeah, show me
I
more
mean,
Brock and Sable.
well, last week or the week before last, we had Gina Mazzani in there who's engaged to Tim Elliott. We didn't. Unless you follow them on Instagram, you wouldn't know that.
That's
I
true.
I, I don't want to see that. It doesn't matter who her coaches are. There's
I know.
Sam Alvey has his wife in the corner. You don't see them hugging and kissing at every eventuality. And
Yeah.
yeah, for me, Tracy Cortez, she's solid. She's 10 in a row now. I think she's 4-0 in the UFC. But it hasn't, you know, even if you just click on a Wikipedia personal life, Cortez is in a romantic relationship with fellow UFC Brian Ortega.
Who cares?
Thank you. Who gives a shit? But it's just, I think Cortez is going to be exposed. I think some of her takedowns were really interesting where she didn't want to get her neck caught in any sort of guillotines or chokes. So she did take the fight down and was quite high up on her opponent, almost chest to chest, in order to avoid getting wrapped up in something. But yeah, I wouldn't say that was a highlight. For me, the highlights are Godinez and that crazy Roy Val finish, which was just a load of fun, to be honest.
Well, let's move forward into what's upcoming this week if you're all set to go, because we got some dumb stuff going on. I don't think we need to cover Bellator because there wasn't anything surprising or out of the ordinary on Bellator. I think that was kind of what we all expected. Yeah, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that and the PFL, Kayla Harrison going to Kayla. The only surprise was that she didn't get a finish, and I think she was pretty pissed off with herself that she didn't get a finish.
Oh, we missed the Canelo fight. Hey, if you've got time, let's do the
Yeah,
Canelo and Bivol fight because I can't believe that we skipped over it for this long. That was maybe the biggest news to come out of the weekend. Hey,
exactly.
tell
Yeah,
us about
we
this.
kind of ran out of time on last week's show to preview it in any great depth, but we knew that Bivol didn't have phenomenal one-punch knockout power, but he's gone to decision. I think in his past 7 fights, I underestimated Bivol, and I'd argue that the reason I underestimate, we know that Bivol and Beterbiev are the two best light heavyweights on the planet, but the reason I think we underestimated Bivol and didn't give too much attention to this fight is because there's a complete lack of hype around this fight, especially for a Canelo fight. And I think that's maybe coming off the back of Taylor Serrano being so historic the week before.
True.
The Zone had to, and Matchroom had to put all of their eggs then in the Canelo basket, and you've only got a week to hype a Canelo fight against Bivol, who isn't a great, isn't a big speaker, he isn't a phenomenal standout name. I've watched the fight. I haven't watched it in any great detail, but Canelo did look flat. And it appeared to me like Bivol didn't really respect Canelo. He was unloading on Canelo I think it was the 6th or 7th round. He was unloading on Canelo on the ropes. Yeah. He was landing, but then Canelo was sort of calling him on, and Bivol was like, "No, I know what your game is here. I'm just going to stand my own ground." He's like, "No, you come to me," and he was landing at ease on Canelo, and Canelo was landing on Bivol, but I think the reach had a bit of a factor, and because he was landing a lot of shots on the arms and on the gloves of Bivol, and
yeah,
the right man won. I'm surprised how close it was because the scorecards were a joke. I think the official scorecards had all 4 of the first rounds going to Canelo. I thought Bivol won the first. There's an argument that he won the second and won the third. And it's also a joke. There's a rematch clause. Canelo's a challenger going into that fight, and he's got a rematch clause against Bivol. Now, I can understand it the other way around if Bivol wanted to put a rematch clause in, because that's often the case when you've got a champion, they have the rematch clause. But Canelo's got the rematch clause as the challenger. That's probably the fight that he's going to take because.
But no one's interested. We saw it. We saw the conclusion.
I don't see how Canelo, and even if he does beat him by decision now, is there a shot to see a third fight between the two? No, it's not in my opinion. It was a good fight. There wasn't any great the biggest highlight was the scorecards with Bivol actually getting the victory. That was the biggest sort of standout moment.
Right.
But I just don't really see why there was a rematch clause. But it is what it is. I imagine the rematch will be done at the back end of the year. But Bivol is he's still going to be too big. He's still going to be too long, and he's still going to be. He outboxed Canelo, which is something that we didn't really expect going into the fight. And I think that's the most surprising thing about it. He was able to outbox Canelo with ease. He never looked in trouble. Yes, he did lose rounds, but he didn't look in trouble at any point against Canelo. And I think, it's probably just a step too far for Alvarez to have stepped up in weight to face someone like Bivol, who was seen as if that Canelo would have fought Beterbiev, he would have been finished. I think he saw Bivol as the easier of the two, and he was going to pick up Bivol's belt, go back down to fight Golovkin, and then go back up to fight Beterbiev. And now there's a massive spanner in the works.
I think I agree. It's tough to make the argument for the rematch, and I think that would damage Canelo's legacy more losing a second time. Because if you lose once to this guy, you can make the argument of like, oh, I got sized on. It is what it is. I took a risk in a higher weight class. We're just going to leave bygones. We're just going to let that go. Losing a second time, now that kind of gets into legacy territory. I don't think it's the right decision for him to try a second time around. Am I wrong here?
No, for sure. I completely agree. And, like you say, it's, the first time maybe I did underestimate quite how big he is, quite how long. McGregor taking on Diaz. Yeah, sure. I underestimated quite how big he is, but it's a legacy fight. I'm taking on all comers. Then the second fight happens. And now we need to see a third fight. That's a trilogy to me that makes sense because, the second fight he prepared for, but, he didn't clearly win that fight. And if there's any debate here on whether Canelo wins the second fight, if it does go to the scorecards, it's close, it's a split. I don't think there's to me, there's just not a huge call to see a second fight.
No.
But rematches to rematches. Hopefully, Bivol will enter that fight at the A side now.
I think
a hell of a lot more.
I think he absolutely will because he dominated the fight. He clearly won the fight. He showed he's the better boxer. Coming up this week, we got some weird stuff like Floyd Mayweather and Anderson Silva fighting in the skies of Dubai. They're calling it. There's also
a helipad or something, isn't it?
That can't be. There's no way. It's going to be in some rec room in the basement or something like that.
I mean, yeah, I think the less said about that, the better. And the breakdown next week will be Floyd Mayweather had a little bit of a jog around with some guy that no one's ever heard of, and Anderson Silva probably gets another knockout of some guy that not many people have heard of.
It's a good fight for Anderson Silva, and it's a good fight for Floyd Mayweather, and we know what's going on here. They had some money, and they earned some money for doing this fight, but it's not an important fight to anyone's legacy. It's not going to change rankings. Nothing's going to happen, but Anderson Silva and Floyd are going to walk away millionaires from this little trip, and that's fine.
For sure. And the best thing that can happen out of this weekend is Anderson Silva calls out Jake Paul. That's the best thing that can happen, but I also kind of hope that he doesn't, because that then brings Anderson Silva and Jake Paul into the same conversation.
It's happening. It is too late. It is happening. UFC. There's also Blachowicz versus Rakic. Or was this canceled due to injury, or is that still on?
No, this is what I was just about to say. I'm almost not excited for this fight because it's been. I think it's been.
It's been rescheduled a few times.
Rescheduled about 3 or 4 times, and it's just it's. I mean, it's a good fight. I'm excited. Blachowicz coming off the title fight last, Rakic on quite a decent run, but. Yeah, it's been rescheduled about 3 or 4 times, I believe. And then the card itself, it's not a bad card, but it's it's strange. Ryan Spann, Iron Kutalaba, Caitlin Chikagian welcoming Amanda Hebas to the flyweight division. Jake Hadley finally making his debut. Then you got Nick Maximov on the card, who was the co-main event on a Strawn Strickland card, and now, as per Tapology, is opening up the entire card.
Yeah,
I just don't get it. But
it's not bad. It's not a stay up for it, but it's not a bad one.
Definitely not. It's a catch it. We're in Las Vegas, so it's a catch it in the morning on a replay, which isn't the worst thing in the world, I guess. But Andrea Lee, I think I'm excited to see Andrea Lee because she looked really good in her last 2 fights, and between Andrea Lee and Caitlin Chikagian, we could be seeing the next flyweight contender, or the next lamb to the slaughter, as it were, for Shevchenko.
I think you might be right about that. So there's definitely title implications on this card. It's weird how no one's excited for this card, and we're saying clearly there's title implications for more than one title at this event, and everyone goes yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm just not that excited for this one. Honestly,
we could be seeing Rakic Rakic is the next title contender is more than likely if he wins, but yeah, it is what it is. We've obviously got Bellator London as well. It's a fairly decent card. It's disappointing in a way that obviously we're not getting MVP versus Amasov. Obviously it's got a little bit more going on, should we say, the Ukrainian. But MVP, seeing if he can finally make that transition from nearly there to there as a Bellator fighter. Lyoto Machida is fighting Fabian Edwards. Watanabe versus Denise Keholtz.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
That's a good one right there.
I think that's probably the next contender for Liz Carmouche's title. Paul Daly's last ever fight.
Yep.
You know, he's retiring with a record of 43, 18, and 2. He's set to retire after this one. That is some record.
Man, and he took some other fights on the side. You know what's funny? This has so little buzz, and it's a good fight card. This has so little buzz that I think I would have gone to it if I was like slightly aware. But I only started looking at this 2 days ago, and I thought, it's too late to go at this point. But I would have gone to this one. This was a pretty good one, yeah.
Yeah, you know, you've got listed throughout the card. You've got a lot of European talent. You've got you've got a lady that's 4-4-1 opening up the thing. But, you know, you got Lee Chadwick, who's had millions of fights. Charlie Ward, obviously a friend of McGregor, and that's the guy that sort of jumped into the when McGregor jumped into the ring and had his altercation with Mark Goddard. You got Tim Wilde, who's headlined Bellator before. Kate Jackson, who's a pioneer of British female MMA.
Yeah.
UFC vet Oliver Aimkamp. You know, you got Daniel Welsh. And Paul Daly's last ever fight. You've got Lyoto Machida's on the card, you know.
Might be his last fight. We never know.
Well, you almost hope so in a way.
Yes.
And then we've got is this the first? I don't know if this is the first or maybe, you know, it's the first Invicta card for a while. We haven't seen too much Invicta, but that'll be on. I'm assuming that'll be on UFC Fight Pass. So yeah, definitely check that out because it's you know, it's the third card of the year. But it's the first since March, and yeah, definitely check that out because it's they always put on a good show, Invicta, and that like I say, that'll be on Fight Pass, so be sure to check that out.
Absolutely, a lot of weekend of fights coming up. I don't have anything else. My name is Tim Wheaton with MMA Sucka, joined as always by Frazer Krohn, MMA Sucka. Frazer, what else have we got to say this week?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it all. Like I said, a busy weekend, and we've got bits and bobs this weekend, but luckily it's not so busy, so we can take it easy a little bit this weekend and hope that we don't get any more fights like that co-main event anytime soon.
Absolutely. Frazer, appreciate your time. Have a wonderful week.